Thank you for attending the Nevada Department of Education's test security training. This fulfills the annual required training for all school test coordinators, test administrators, and proctors. In this session, we'll discuss the importance of test security to maintain a valid and reliable assessment. We'll look at some best practices to keep administration secure, and finally, we'll talk about some specific policies in Nevada. Test security training is required by state law, which outlines the responsibilities of the people involved in order to minimize errors and to provide uniform procedures in administration. Every student in the Nevada public education system must be given the opportunity for a fair and valid testing experience so they may receive the instruction they need to be successful. Here are some ideas to facilitate a secure test administration. To help ensure proper test delivery, it's critical to be aware of potential threats. Threats will vary by test delivery mode, such as computer and paper and pencil. Environmental control means that test takers cannot use environmental features such as location and access to the restrooms to cheat or steal. Site inspections ensure that test security procedures are being followed at each test site. Here are just a few of the threats that an accountability testing program faces. Examples include using pre-knowledge of live content, colluding with others, using cheating aids, using a proxy test taker, modifying the scoring process, or copying answers. One possible definition of cheating is a behavior which could result in inappropriately increasing the score on a test. The existence of threats and vulnerabilities during test administration is not always apparent. In fact, sometimes the risks don't even enter our thinking until we analyze data and question the presence of anomalies. When tests are given over the course of several days, weeks, or months, they can be easily stolen and disclosed regardless of the administration method. Some believe that items can be compromised by exposure or overuse. That's not true. If no one shares or discloses the items, it doesn't matter how many people have seen them. Items do not become tattered like a well-read book. They are stolen, and it only takes one person to harvest them. Social media and evolving technology add additional degrees of difficulty. Administrators need to remain vigilant in making sure that unauthorized devices are not present and test content remains secure, and remain aware that even the best device awareness may not catch all instances of cheating. Test security is in a constant race with new technology, but even classic means of technology usage can become security challenges. Only by carefully monitoring the administration can we assure that content isn't shared online. Test administration basics include: administrators must follow published procedures. No unsupervised breaks are allowed. Personal belongings and non-permissible materials are prohibited. Electronic devices are prohibited in the testing environment unless they're required for test administration or if a student has an accommodation for a specific permissible device. Test takers and their screens are closely and regularly monitored. Teachers, when practicable, should not monitor their own classrooms. Review the State Test Security Procedures publication and your district security policy documentation for specific details of these very general points. Here is a sample checklist for test administration. Note that this list will change depending on the priorities and environment of the test. Now let's look at some specifics for test administration in Nevada. School test coordinators should familiarize themselves with the available resources, including the NDE Test Security Procedures Manual, your district and school test security procedures, the Usability, Accessibility, and Accommodations Guide, and Test Coordinator and Administrator Manuals. Any individual involved with state-mandated assessments must be trained in security procedures. Records of these trainings must be kept for 3 school years. The test administrator is responsible for all testing activities at the classroom level and must be a licensed Nevada educator. Licensed substitutes may serve as test administrators. Proctors, or persons assisting with test administration, may be unlicensed but must not be unsupervised in the testing room. A licensed educator must be present at all times. Accommodations and supports allow for equitable access to test content. Appropriate accommodations and designated supports must be selected in DRC's Insight portal prior to administration. Provide non-embedded accommodations and support information to classroom test administrators, and ensure accommodations and supports are provided at the student level. If practicable, the NDE strongly recommends seating charts for test administration. Check the testing environment for non-permissible materials on desktops and walls, and test tickets must be maintained securely. Inform students in advance of what is expected of them. Electronic devices other than those required for test administration are prohibited unless a student has an accommodation that allows for a specific permissible device. Possession of unauthorized devices or interacting with other students are prohibited activities and grounds for invalid scores. All instances of student cheating will result in invalid scores, and it is the district's responsibility to invalidate the tests. The NDE may require further invalidations after reviewing evidence. At the beginning of the testing session, students must be given the appropriate test ticket. Personal items and non-testing materials must be stored prior to the start of the session. No unauthorized individuals may be present in the testing room. This includes parents, community volunteers, students, and school staff who are not participating in testing. All individuals in the testing room must be documented, and those records must be maintained for 3 school years. Ensure that test environments are quiet, scripts are read verbatim, and students are monitored to ensure they're working independently and adhering to procedures. No assistance of any kind may be provided to students beyond making sure they understand the general testing directions. Access to unauthorized devices or materials is prohibited. Test administrators and proctors should also avoid cell phone use unless it's the only means of contacting the administration. Licensed personnel must be present while students have access to the tests. Online test tickets contain student identifying information and are considered secure. Tickets should be counted when distributed and collected. Ensure that tickets are provided to the correct students, verifying that students with similar names are correctly identified. Some tests will require tickets to be collected and redistributed for another testing session or part. Follow the instructions in the test administrator's manuals for specifics. If a student tests with another student's ticket or tests without the required accommodations or supports, test administrators must report the incident to your school test coordinator immediately and wait for further instructions. Do not retest a student until you've been notified that the test has been regenerated. Scratch paper is also secure and must be collected after each test session or part. Fresh scratch paper must be distributed at the beginning of a new session or part. The only exception to this rule is on the smarter summative math and ELA performance tasks, where student scratch paper may be collected and redistributed to the same students between 2 parts of the same task. Breaks must be supervised. Unlicensed personnel may supervise breaks that are occurring outside of the testing environment. Online tests may be paused for up to 20 minutes, and a countdown timer will appear on the screen. Remember, students may not return to a part of a test following an unsupervised break. The Computer Adaptive Test, or CAT, is an exception because students will not be able to view test content they have seen previously. Online performance tasks lock down each night or time out after 20 minutes of inactivity or when a student submits a test. Unlocking a test allows a student to access a test that has been timed out or submitted. Under certain circumstances, a district test director has permission to unlock a test when a student has completed 5 or fewer responses. The school test coordinator must notify the district test director if any of the following occur: an interruption in the testing process, such as technology malfunction, student illness, or school-wide evacuations, or instances of human error. Disclosure of test content is strictly prohibited. It is the property of the NDE and it is copyright protected. Photographing, recording, or transmitting any part of a test or testing session is prohibited, with the following exceptions. The Nevada alternate assessment is a recorded administration, and a district or school test coordinator may capture evidence in the investigation of a potential testing irregularity. A signed confidentiality agreement must be submitted with the evidence. Do not read, review, look at, copy, or take notes on test content. Test administrators who will be exposed to test content while providing an accommodation must sign a confidentiality agreement prior to testing. Any medical caregivers required to be present in the testing room must also sign a confidentiality agreement prior to testing. Specific instructions for testing homebound students are available in the Test Security Procedures Manual. Immediate notification of a potential irregularity is required by law. The school test coordinator or principal will complete an online report using the Cavion Core incident tracking software. The NDE and district are obligated to investigate if there is a reason to believe an irregularity has occurred. Possible consequences may include invalid scores, corrective actions, or license sanctions. Remember, the principal has the ultimate responsibility for all testing activities and is required to cooperate with investigations. We've mentioned some concerns specific to the Nevada Summative and Science tests, the CRTs, previously because they cause a high proportion of irregularities each year. But it is important to note that each assessment's online student management system has unique procedures that are described in detail in training specifically tailored to those assessments. For example, the ACT, MAPS test, and WIDA all have their own specific instructions. NDE contact information is on your screen. If you have any questions, please contact your school or district test coordinator. Thank you for your cooperation.